10:11 a.m., Reno, Nevada. The air conditioning was too cold for a room this expensive. She's broke. Brian Foster didn't say it quietly. He didn't have to. The words landed hard in the glass-walled office, sharp enough to cut through the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft click of keyboards outside the door. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, my sweater sleeves pulled over my wrists, and kept my face still. Not because it didn't hurt, because it did, but because I'd learned something over a lifetime. People like him feed on reaction. Brian leaned back in his chair like the verdict had already been stamped. He didn't look at me when he spoke. Not really. He looked at the paperwork, at the signature line, like I was just a step in a process. "We can do this the easy way," he said, tapping a pen against the desk in a steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. The sound made my stomach tighten, but I kept breathing slowly, evenly. The room smelled faintly of toner and lemon cleaner, too clean, too controlled. Outside the window, Nevada sunlight glared off parked cars like nothing in the world could ever be cold. Then I heard a second voice, lower, half amused. Someone just outside the office door. "If she's broke, she'll sign." A quiet laugh followed, muffled by glass. My throat tightened, not from fear, from something older. Shame tries to climb up the spine like ivy. It searches for cracks. Not today, I told myself, not in front of him. I shifted slightly in the chair, the leather creaking beneath me, and felt the familiar weight of the worn manila envelope inside my purse-creased edges, soft corners, years of handling. I rested my fingertips over it just enough to steady myself. Brian slid the papers closer. The top page was crisp, heavy stock, printed in a font that looked official enough to silence questions. "It's standard," he said, the same line men always use when they want you to stop reading. "Sign, and we move forward. Don't sign, and things get difficult." He smiled like he was doing me a favor. I looked down at the document, at my name typed neatly at the top, and saw the faint highlight over the signature line, like someone had already decided where I'd give up. He thinks I'm cornered, I realized. He thinks I'm alone. I lifted my gaze slowly and met his eyes. Brian's confidence wasn't loud, it was practiced. The kind that comes from believing age equals weakness. I didn't correct him, I didn't argue. I simply let the silence stretch, long enough to make the room uncomfortable, long enough for him to fill it with more of his own certainty. My purse sat beside my chair, the envelope inside it like a quiet heartbeat. Then from the hallway, I heard footsteps, firm, purposeful, approaching the glass door, not rushed, not hesitant. The handle turned, the door opened. A man stepped in, carrying a sealed cardboard box in both arms. Brian's pen stopped tapping. Longer pause. 10:15 a.m., Reno, Nevada. Cold air, bright light, and a room built for pressure. The man with the box didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. The cardboard looked ordinary, but the way he carried it, careful, steady, like it mattered, changed the temperature in the room more than the air conditioning ever could. Brian's eyes flicked to the box, then to me, then back again, as if trying to calculate what it meant without asking. I kept my posture straight, my hands still folded, my face calm. Let him wonder, I told myself. Let him feel that uncertainty for a moment. The office was designed to intimidate glass walls, chrome edges, and a desk so polished it reflected the overhead lights like a spotlight. The fluorescent hum sat in the background like a nervous system you couldn't switch off. Somewhere behind the walls, printers whirred and phones rang softly, muffled by carpet and money. I could smell that sterile mix of toner and citrus cleaner again, clean enough to feel clinical, as if human emotion wasn't allowed inside. My fingertips were cold from the AC, but my chest felt warm with something stubborn, not anger, not panic, dignity. Brian cleared his throat and put on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can we help you?" The man set the box down near the corner of the desk with a soft thud, nothing dramatic, but it landed like punctuation. "I'm here for Mrs. Louise," he said, and the way he said my name correctly, respectfully, made my shoulders loosen by a fraction. Brian didn't like that. I saw it in the quick tightening of his jaw. I glanced at the papers again, the bold header, the settlement, the clean language that tried to sound harmless. Brian slid the pen closer as if proximity could create consent. "Helen," he said, too familiar now. "This is straightforward. Sign, and we close this out. You don't want to drag things out. It gets messy." He said messy like it would be my fault. I felt the sting rise again, that old reflex to apologize for taking up space. "No," I reminded myself. "You don't apologize for being careful." I turned my head slightly toward the glass wall and caught my reflection. An older woman in a simple sweater, hair neatly brushed, eyes tired but steady. Behind me, Brian looked sharp, impatient, certain. The contrast made me want to laugh, but I didn't. I breathed in slowly through my nose and let the cold air fill my lungs. This room isn't the truth, I told myself. It's just a stage. Brian's voice lowered, sweetened with false concern. "At your age, financial stress is dangerous," he said. "We're trying to protect you." Then he leaned forward, tapping the top page with his pen. "Sign today," he said, voice calm again, "or we start the next step. Foreclosure paperwork, formal notices, the whole thing." My stomach tightened just for a second. The word foreclosure carries weight, even when you know it's being used like a club. I didn't reach for the pen. I didn't flinch. I kept my gaze steady and my hand resting on my purse, feeling the manila envelope inside like an anchor. And the man with the box still standing quietly at my side waited, as if he already knew what I was going to do next. Longer pause. 10:19 a.m. Reno, Nevada. The moment stretched, and my whole life started speaking back. When Brian said foreclosure, like it was a word he could toss around without consequence, something inside me went very still, not frozen focused. I stared at the pen resting beside the papers, the silver tip catching the overhead light, and I felt memories rise up the way desert wind lifts dust quiet at first, then unavoidable. Because you don't reach my age without learning what paperwork can do to a person, and what it can't do if you refuse to surrender your mind. I've lived in Nevada long enough to know the difference between heat and pressure. Heat is honest. You feel it on your skin. Pressure is polite. It smiles while it pushes. 30 years ago, I was a young woman with tired hands and hopeful eyes, working 2 jobs and building a life one careful choice at a time. Reno was louder then, brighter signs, late-night traffic, the sound of slot machines spilling out of open doors downtown. Money moved fast in this state, and people who didn't have it were expected to move faster. I learned early that pride doesn't pay bills, but dignity keeps you standing while you do. My husband and I bought our first home, the slow way saving, jar by jar, paycheck by paycheck. I can still hear the clink of coins in a glass jar, the scratch of pencil on a notepad as I balance numbers late at night.
There were winters when the heater struggled and summers when the air felt too thick to breathe.
There were months we ate the same simple meals and called it good enough. We weren't poor in spirit, just careful. And when life got cruel, careful became survival. After my husband passed, the world didn't soften for me, it sharpened. The calls came faster. The offers got friendlier. Men in suits started speaking to me like I was fragile, like grief had made me incompetent. That was the first time I learned to read tone as a warning sign. The second lesson came the day a hospital administrator tried to rush me through documents while my hands were still shaking from loss. I remember the smell of antiseptic and burnt coffee, the squeak of my shoes on waxed floors, and the way he said, "It's standard," as if standard meant safe. I didn't sign that day, not until I read every line twice. And later, when I found a clause that would have drained what little my husband left behind, I realized something that changed me forever. Paper can steal without touching you. So I became the kind of woman who keeps copies, receipts, notes, dates written in the margins. I never made a show of it. I never bragged. I just prepared. Nevada teaches you that flash attracts predators. Quiet keeps you free. Over the years, I made one decision, one smart, private decision that I didn't share with neighbors, relatives, or strangers in glass offices. Not because I was ashamed, but because I wasn't interested in becoming someone else's target. Back in that Reno office, Brian watched me like he expected, tears pleading, trembling hands. I kept my face calm and my voice inside my chest where it belonged. My fingers brushed the edge of the manila envelope in my purse, and I felt the old steadiness return. You don't pressure someone like me unless you believe I'm alone, I thought, and that's your mistake. I lifted my eyes slowly and met his, again quiet, unblinking. Because what Brian didn't know was that I had been preparing for men like him for decades. Longer pause tooth. 10:24 a.m., Reno, Nevada. Some people don't threaten you with fists. They threaten you with procedure. Brian adjusted his tie as if the room belonged to him, then smiled again, thin, practiced, painless. The kind of smile you see right before someone tries to take something and call it help. He shifted the papers so they sat perfectly square on the desk, aligned with the edge like a little ritual. Even his movements felt rehearsed, slow enough to look calm, fast enough to keep me from thinking. "Let's keep this simple," he said. "You sign, we close the file, and you walk out relieved." The man with the box stood to my left, quiet as a shadow. Brian kept glancing at the box, then away, as if looking too long would make him admit he wasn't fully in control. I watched Brian the way you watch a card dealer who's too comfortable. His cufflinks caught the light. His pen stayed between his fingers like a small weapon. The first red flag came in his language, how he called my home an asset, how he called my questions confusion. The second red flag came in his urgency. Men who are telling the truth don't need you to hurry. "This is standard," he repeated. "You don't need to read every page. It's already been reviewed." Reviewed? By who? I turned the page. The paper whispered. Brian's jaw tightened. A date was wrong by a full year. Another account reference number looked almost like mine, but wasn't mine. That's how thieves work. They imitate. So this isn't just pressure, I thought. This is a setup. "Everything looks complicated when you overthink it," Brian said softly. "Trust me, this is for your protection. And if you don't sign today, we move to the next step. Notices, court filings. It gets unpleasant." "Why is the date wrong?" I asked. For half a second, his expression slipped. Annoyance. Then the mask returned. "That's clerical," he said too fast. "We can correct it later." He slid the pen closer. Helen, don't make this harder than it needs to be. I didn't touch the pen. I let my hand rest on my purse right, where the envelope sat. Brian's eyes followed the movement. His knee bounced once, then stopped. And I understood. He wasn't worried about my feelings. He was worried about what was in that box. And what I might already know, Angapaz tus. 10:31 a.m., Reno, Nevada. Betrayal rarely announces itself. It arrives disguised as help. This is the balance you owe, Brian said, tapping the paper. The number was bold, heavy printed like judgment. Beneath it, softer words: settlement option, expedited resolution, voluntary authorization. That isn't my balance, I thought. That isn't even my account. He wanted me to accept his version of reality first, then negotiate inside it. We're trying to keep you out of trouble, he said, almost sympathetic. I turned the page slowly. The paper whispered. Brian's jaw tightened. Then I found it buried language authorizing a transfer tied to my home as collateral. Not a plan, a handoff. Why is my home mentioned here? I asked. It's standard language, he repeated. This is the best option you're going to get. At your age, you don't want court, stress, all of this. Then he leaned back and said it casually, like cruelty was efficient. Between us, you're broke. Sign, and we make this painless. I felt shame try to rise. I didn't let it take my voice. I touched the manila envelope inside my purse, grounding. What's that? He asked. Just my records, I said. Records won't change what's on our system. He laughed, dismissive. Then he sharpened. You can either sign, or we start formal action. Notices go out. People will know. There it was, his real weapon. Exposure, public shame. Cliffhanger. Brian pushed the pen toward my hand. Sign it now. And the banker's hand moved slowly toward the tape on the box. Longer pause twos. 10:39 a.m., Reno, Nevada. Control doesn't always shout. Sometimes it clicks quietly in the background. Brian kept the pen pointed at me like it was a simple choice ink or embarrassment. The banker's fingers hovered near the tape on the box, not pulling yet. Just there, a calm reminder that something heavier than Brian's words had entered the room. Helen, Brian said, sweetness forced. Sign, and you'll have peace. Then my phone vibrated once inside my purse, a small sound. But my stomach tightened anyway, not fear instinct. Brian's eyes narrowed. Is that your phone? It's nothing, I said softly. The banker spoke for the first time. Mrs. Louise asked me to attend. I'm here to make sure her records match what you're presenting. This isn't necessary, Brian snapped quickly. This is straightforward. Then Brian did something subtle. He tapped his keyboard under the desk. A soft click. My phone vibrated again twice this time, and the blood drained from my fingertips. Brian leaned back, satisfied. Before we proceed, your online access has been temporarily restricted. Standard security measure. My throat tightened. So he did it right now in front of me. That was the second betrayal, isolation, cutting me off from my own information. I forced my breath to stay slow. Why? I asked. It happens when there's risk, he said. It protects everyone involved. And frankly, we can't have outside interference complicating things. Outside interference, as if truth was an inconvenience. I touched the manila envelope in my purse. You prepared. You kept copies. This is why. Brian slid the pen closer. Sign. This is your best option. I looked at the signature line, then at the box, and realized with startling clarity, Brian wasn't trying to help me settle a debt. He was trying to hurry me into silence before the truth got opened. Cliffhanger. My phone vibrated again, an alert I didn't even need to read, and the banker finally placed his thumb under the tape, ready to peel it back. Longer pause. 2s, 10:47 a.m., Reno, Nevada. The moment a person stops pretending is the moment you see who they are. The banker's thumb slid under the tape, slow, deliberate, and the sound of adhesive separating from cardboard was so quiet it should have been nothing. But in that room, it felt like thunder. Brian's eyes snapped to the box. His calm looked strained now. "Let's not do that," he said quickly. "There's no need to create a scene." A scene. That was what he feared. Not wrongdoing, visibility. "I'm trying to save you from embarrassment," he said, voice syrupy again. "If you refuse, this goes public. Notices, court filings." Then he dropped the mask. "Ma'am, you don't have leverage." And louder, so the glass could carry it. "She's broke. And broke people don't negotiate." The humiliation hit like a slap, not because I believed it, but because he wanted others to believe it. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I looked him in the eye and let the silence stretch long enough to make him uncomfortable. "Sign, or the process swallows you," he snapped. "I'm being generous." The banker spoke, calm but unmistakable. "Mrs. Louise is entitled to review all documents. Restricting access mid-meeting without written consent is a serious issue." Brian flushed. "You're overstepping." Then he started to say it. "I'm not going to let an old woman," and stopped. But the contempt was already hanging in the air. There it is, I thought. That's the real him. I lifted the worn manila envelope and placed it on the desk in front of me, not as a threat, as a statement. "What is that?" he asked, suddenly uncertain. "It's my life," I said simply, "in copies." The banker's hand went back to the tape. Brian straightened sharply. "Stop," he said too fast. "You'll regret it." I leaned forward slightly. "Call whoever you need to call, because I'm done being rushed." Outside the glass, 2 employees slowed, noticing the tension. Brian noticed that too, and his face changed. Not anger, fear. Cliffhanger. The banker began to open the box, one flap lifting. And Brian said under his breath, "You have no idea what you're doing." Longer pause 2s. 11:03 a.m., Reno, Nevada. The sun outside was blazing, but I'd never felt colder walking out of a building. I didn't remember standing up. I only remember the chair legs scraping softly against the carpet, and Brian's face tightening when he realized I was no longer participating. The box sat half open, one flap lifted like a curtain about to rise. I gathered my purse, the manila envelope still warm from my hand, and turned toward the door without rushing. "If you walk out, you're making this worse," Brian called. "You don't get to come back and change your mind." I don't need permission to protect myself, I thought. The banker stepped with me into the hallway, steady, calm, like a shield made of professionalism. Behind the glass, Brian stayed planted, watching. I felt eyes on me in the corridor, employees pretending not to stare, whispering like shame could be measured in decibels. The fluorescent lights were too bright. The air smelled like disinfectant and paper. When the elevator doors closed, silence hit hard. I looked at my reflection, an older woman with careful hair and tired eyes, standing very straight. My hands trembled then, finally, but I didn't let it turn into panic. I pressed my fingertips against the envelope through my purse and breathed in slowly. Shame is a tool, I reminded myself. It's not truth. Outside, Nevada heat wrapped around me like a blanket. Cold, office to blazing sidewalk, like the world reminding me what was real. I sat behind the wheel and closed the door. And that was when the dam tried to break, not because I believe Brian's words, but because being spoken about like you're nothing does something to the body. You're not weak for feeling it, I told myself. You're strong for not obeying it. I placed the manila envelope on the passenger seat like a companion and ran my thumb over the faded label, proof, quiet proof, the kind that outlives loud accusations. Then I reached for my phone. The screen was full of alerts, login issues, temporary restrictions, verification requests. Brian hadn't only pressured me, he'd tried to lock me out of my own life. My hand steadied. I scrolled to one number and hit call. It rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice answered, "Helen?" "No," I said quietly, "but I'm clear." "I suspected this," he replied. "I've been watching the irregularities." "You need to come," I told him. "Today." "I will," he said. "And Helen, I'm bringing the box." Cliffhanger. I ended the call, looked at the envelope beside me and whispered, "All right then." Because the next time Brian Foster saw me, I wouldn't be walking in alone. Longer pause, twos. 1:08 p.m., Reno, Nevada. The kind of quiet that follows humiliation can either break you or build you. By the time I reached the small branch office where my banker worked, the shaking in my hands had settled into something sharper, cleaner. The lobby air was cool and steady, smelling faintly of carpet and fresh paper. I will not carry their shame, I told myself. I will carry my truth. My banker met me before I reached the counter. He said my name like it mattered. Helen. He guided me into a private room. The door closed with a gentle click that sounded like safety. On the table sat a bigger cardboard box, sealed, reinforced, labeled neatly like a file that had been waiting. "I've been monitoring unusual activity," he said. "Multiple access attempts. A restriction request initiated without in-person confirmation. Documents routed through channels that don't match your profile." He slid a printed log across the table dates, times, user IDs, little facts that don't look dramatic until they add up to a pattern. "So it wasn't just pressure," I said softly. "He was already moving." My banker nodded. "Yes, and he was moving fast, because fast signatures leave fewer questions." That sentence ran cold through me. Brian wanted panic because panic signs anything to make it stop. I opened my worn manila envelope and spread my copy, statements, handwritten notes, timelines. My banker's eyes flicked over them, and respect deepened in his expression. "You kept everything." "I had to," I said. "People don't believe you when you're calm. They believe paper." He pulled out a thinner folder, clean pages, official print. "There's another part of this," he said quietly. "Something Brian doesn't know." He slid the pages toward me. I read and the room went quiet around the words. A trust, a protected structure, long-term, legally sealed, private. "I'm not broke," I said. "Not as a boast, as a fact." My banker met my eyes. "No, you're not. And because of that, this isn't a mistake. This is targeting." "Tell me what we do next," I said. "We document everything," he replied, "and we print logs, pull authorization records, bring full verification, and we do not argue emotionally, we present facts." He tapped the sealed box. "This box contains every record we'll need." "If he tries again," he said, "we correct it in the light." He lifted the box with both arms. "We'll go back." Cliffhanger. As we walked toward the lobby, he said softly, "Let him believe he's winning. Right up until the moment the box opens." Longer pause twos. 3:22 p.m., Reno, Nevada. The same building, the same glass walls, but I wasn't the same woman walking in. The afternoon sun turned the parking lot into a mirror. Heat shimmered above the asphalt. My banker walked beside me carrying the sealed box, steady as a man delivering something fragile and dangerous at the same time. Inside, the lobby air hit cold again. Fluorescent light, lemon cleaner, the hum of money at work. A few heads turned when they saw the box. Let them look, I thought. They looked when I was being shamed. They can look when I'm being heard. Down the hallway, Brian's door was half open. Through the glass, he sat with papers arranged like a trap reset for a second attempt. He glanced up and smiled tight. "Well," he said, "I'm glad you came back." He didn't look at my face first. He looked at the box. His smile faltered just a fraction. "What's that?" he asked. "My banker," I said simply. "He's here to verify." "This is unnecessary," Brian waved. "You're complicating something that has a clear solution." He pointed to the papers. The pen lay exactly where it had been earlier, placed like a lure. I sat down slowly. My banker set the box on the desk firmly. A soft thud, like a period at the end of a sentence. "Let's keep this private." Brian lowered his voice. "You don't want a spectacle." "We're not here for spectacle," my banker said. "We're here for accuracy." "My system," Brian began. "My system," my banker interrupted gently, "shows discrepancies, including access restrictions initiated today without Mrs. Louise's signed authorization." The air changed. Brian tried again. "Routine security." My banker placed his hand on the tape. Brian's eyes locked on it like it was a fuse. "You're making a mistake," Brian said quietly. My banker's fingers slid under the tape. The tape began to peel. Cliffhanger, the first flap lifted. Faint scent of paper and ink, and Brian whispered, tight and urgent, "Helen, don't do this." Longer pause to 3:27 p.m., Reno, Nevada. The truth didn't explode. It unfolded, page by page. When the flap lifted, the sound was almost gentle paper, shifting like a quiet breath. Brian reacted like a siren went off. His hand moved toward the documents, as if he could cover them fast enough to erase what we'd already seen. My banker placed files neatly on the desk, tabbed, labeled, time-stamped. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic, just evidence so organized it felt like a mirror held up to lies. "Account access restricted at 10:38 a.m., my banker said, pointing. "Request originated from an internal terminal assigned to this department." "That's not proof," Brian snapped. "Time-stamped," my banker continued, "and cross-verified." Then a line appeared that made my stomach tighten. High compliance likelihood due to age and presumed limited access. He'd reduced me to a probability, a target. Brian tried to wave it away. "Internal language. It means someone assumed she would sign under pressure," my banker replied. Then came signature overlays, my handwriting against the attempted authorizations. The strokes didn't match. A copy trying to imitate a life. This is turning into an accusation, Brian warned. Yes, my banker said. It does. He pulled a thinner folder clean, untouched by Brian's hands. This is Mrs. Louise's protected account structure. Brian blinked. Her what? A trust. Long-term, private, the kind you build quietly over years. You called me broke, I said softly. But you never asked. You just decided. My client has sufficient assets to cover legitimate obligations, my banker said. So the urgency and pressure applied here can't be explained by help, only intent. Cliffhanger. My banker slid one final page forward, highlighted in yellow, and said, Now, let's talk about who approved this transfer attempt. A longer pause, 3:34 p.m., Reno, Nevada. In a glass office, there's nowhere for truth to hide. The highlighted page sat between us like a spotlight, a single name in bold. Brian's posture stiffened. He glanced toward the hallway people, slowing, watching. This is escalating, he said. Misunderstanding. This isn't confusion, my banker replied. It's a pattern. I spoke clear, not loud. You tolerated humiliating me. Brian froze. He didn't expect my voice. You said I was broke, like it meant I didn't deserve time or respect or the right to read what you put in front of me. I was being practical, he snapped. You were emotional, confused. Mrs. Louise asked direct questions, my banker said. She was dismissed. Her access was restricted mid-meeting. Unauthorized actions were initiated. Those are violations. We can fix this, Brian tried, voice lower now. Privately. The only thing you tried to fix, I said, was my ability to say no. We've already copied the logs, my banker added, quiet, professional, deadly. Brian went pale. Longer pause, 5:18 p.m., Reno, Nevada. Downfall doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it arrives in emails and silence. There were no dramatic escorts. Accountability moves like paperwork moves, quietly, deliberately. But I felt the shift immediately. People looked at me differently now, not pity, recognition. Brian stayed in his office. He didn't follow. Silence can be a confession when someone has nothing safe left to say. That evening, my banker forwarded the first email. Access restriction removed. Profile restored. Investigation initiated. The next day, employee placed on administrative leave pending review. Brian's calls stopped. His emails became careful, then disappeared. Professionals don't love drama. They love distance from risk. Once logs exist, risk has a name. When I returned once for follow-up, I was offered water, a chair, time. The same people who hurried me before now spoke slowly, as if speed itself had become suspicious. A week later, a formal letter arrived, thick paper, official seal. It confirmed unauthorized actions had been attempted. My access had been wrongfully restricted. Corrective steps had been taken. My assets were secure. I placed the letter beside my worn manila envelope and sat back. Outside, the sky turned gold, rose, deep purple. Ordinary life continued. Brian wanted me small in a glass office. He wanted shame to feel like truth. He wanted speed to become consent. Instead, his own actions became the record. Cliffhanger. My phone buzzed. One final message from my banker. Helen, it's official. He's gone. 7:36 p.m. Reno, Nevada. Healing doesn't arrive like fireworks. It arrives like air returning to your lungs. When I read he's gone, I didn't cheer. I simply sat at my kitchen table and let the words settle slow and heavy like warm tea moving through a cold body. The house was quiet, soft creaks, refrigerator hum, ceiling fan stirring air in lazy circles. Outside, the Nevada evening cooled down. I thought I would feel victory. What I felt instead was release. Because what Brian did wasn't just paperwork, it was an attempt to rewrite me into a stereotype: confused, broke, disposable. That leaves bruises you can't see. I held the manila envelope, tracing the worn corners. You did what you had to do, I told myself. You protected yourself the way no one else would. I remembered the office cold air, fluorescent hum, the word broke tossed like a stone. Then I remembered the feeling that followed. Clarity. Being calm doesn't mean weak, it means deliberate. I wasn't angry anymore, not sharp. Anger is useful, but it isn't a home. I felt peace earned, not granted. Cliffhanger. As I turned off the kitchen light, I paused and whispered more to myself than anyone else. They won't do that to me again. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Longer pause, 2s, 9:12 p.m., Reno, Nevada. Some endings don't slam doors. They hand you your keys back. That night, the house was quiet in the way only a home with history can be: settled, familiar, faithful. I stood in the kitchen doorway, looking at the same table that had held my life in pieces: bills, grocery lists, holiday cards, grief, laughter, and lately, evidence. Nothing about the room had changed, and yet, everything had. I walked from room to room, touching familiar things: the chair back, the bookshelf edge, the door frame where pencil marks still remembered years. Proof that time doesn't erase you. It records you. Brian thought age made a person easier to rush. He thought quiet meant empty. He thought if he spoke loud and fast enough, my story would shrink until it fit his paperwork. But a life doesn't become small just because someone calls it broke. I opened the drawer one last time. The manila envelope rested inside, worn and honest. I didn't need it as armor anymore, not because the world became kinder, but because I became clearer. What they tried to do wasn't just financial, it was spiritual. They tried to take my right to decide, to question, to breathe before I answered, to exist without apology. Predators don't just want your signature, they want your shame. They want you to doubt yourself so thoroughly, you hand them your freedom and thank them for it. I looked out at the neighborhood porch lights glowing, a car passing softly, tires whispering against the road, ordinary life continuing quiet and steady. I didn't win because I was loud, I won because I was prepared. Because I didn't sign under pressure, because I didn't let a stranger's judgment become my identity. And when the truth arrived, it didn't arrive with drama, it arrived with a box. So, if you hear one thing from my story, let it be this: don't let anyone rush your consent, don't let anyone shame your questions, and don't let anyone decide your worth by how you look in a moment they engineered. Because justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives with a calm woman who refuses to move. Longer pause, 2s.